It's September 1943. Deep in the Pacific Theater, a Japanese squadron commander is reading an intelligence report about America's newest fighter plane, and he's literally laughing out loud. The report describes a fighter that weighs as much as a bomber, an aircraft so heavy and clumsy-looking that it seems to violate every rule of fighter design that the Japanese have perfected over the past 2 years. They're calling it the Hellcat, and this Japanese commander, he thinks it's a joke. Another American failure, another overbuilt, underpowered disaster that his nimble Zero fighters will swat from the sky like flies. But here's what he doesn't know. Here's what none of them know. In exactly 30 days, this so-called failure will begin the most one-sided destruction in aviation history. This heavy, awkward-looking fighter will achieve something that seems impossible. A kill ratio of 19-1. That means for every Hellcat lost, 19 Japanese aircraft would fall from the sky. Before the war ends, the Hellcat will destroy over 5,000 enemy aircraft. It will break the back of Japanese naval aviation. It will turn their best pilots into statistics. And it will prove that everything the Japanese thought they knew about air combat was dead wrong. The Zero had owned the Pacific skies for 2 straight years. Undefeated, untouchable, the most feared fighter plane on Earth. The Hellcat was about to end that reign in the most brutal way possible. This is the story of how American engineers created a weapon so effective that Japanese pilots literally developed a psychological condition from encountering it, how one aircraft changed the entire course of the Pacific War, and how the plane that looked all wrong turned out to be devastatingly right. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will change everything you thought you knew about World War II air combat. The Zero's reign of terror. Let's go back to understand why the Japanese were so confident. Why they laughed at the Hellcat. Because honestly, they had good reason to feel invincible. December 7, 1941. Pearl Harbor. The date that lives in infamy. Japanese naval aviators achieved something that military historians still study today. They lost just 29 aircraft while destroying 347 American planes. Think about that ratio for a second. For every Japanese plane lost, they destroyed 12 American aircraft. But Pearl Harbor was just the beginning. In the Philippines, the Japanese lost 7 fighters while destroying 103 American planes. Over Darwin, Australia, they lost 2 aircraft and shot down 30. The British Far East Fleet? Annihilated. The Dutch East Indies Air Force? Gone in days. And at the center of this absolute domination flew one aircraft. The Mitsubishi A6M Zero. When American engineers finally got their hands on a captured Zero in 1942, they literally couldn't believe what they were seeing. The performance numbers seemed impossible. This fighter had the range of a bomber, the maneuverability of an aerobatic plane, and enough firepower to shred anything it caught. One Japanese ace, a guy named Hiroyoshi Nishizawa, described flying the Zero like this. He said it was like wearing wings. The aircraft responded to thought, not just control inputs. He wrote in his diary that American planes flew like trucks. Powerful, sure, but clumsy and overbuilt. And you know what? He wasn't entirely wrong. The Zero achieved its incredible performance through an absolutely revolutionary design philosophy. Japanese engineers used a special aluminum alloy called extra super duralumin. This stuff created an airframe that was 30% lighter than anything America was building. But here's where it gets interesting. And scary. To save weight, the Zero had no armor plating protecting the pilot. None. Zero protection. No self-sealing fuel tanks either. Those added weight, so they got rid of them. Some pilots even removed their radios to save an extra 30 pounds. Every single ounce was sacrificed for performance. For speed. For maneuverability. For range. The Japanese believed that pilot skill and aircraft agility would win air combat. Protection was for the weak. A true warrior didn't need armor. This philosophy had worked perfectly for 2 years. The Zero dominated everything it faced. British Hurricanes, American P-40 Warhawks, Dutch Brewster Buffaloes. All of them fell before the Zero's guns. By September 1943, Japanese naval aviation wasn't just confident. They were certain. Mathematically certain. The numbers proved their superiority. Which brings us back to that intelligence report about the Hellcat. The American failure? The first detailed reports of the F6F Hellcat reached Japanese intelligence through neutral Swedish sources in early 1943. And honestly, reading these specs, you can understand why the Japanese thought it was propaganda. This thing weighed 12,186 pounds fully loaded. The Zero? 5,800 pounds. The Hellcat weighed more than twice as much. Its wing area spanned 334 square feet. Massive. With a big, draggy radial engine sticking out front. It carried 2,400 rounds of ammunition. Armor plating everywhere. Bulletproof glass. Self-sealing fuel tanks holding 250 gallons. This wasn't a fighter. This was a flying tank. Captain Minoru, the tactical genius who had planned the Pearl Harbor attack, reviewed these specifications at Combined Fleet Headquarters. His analysis, which still exists in Japanese defense archives, was completely dismissive. He wrote, quote, "The Americans have learned nothing. This Hellcat represents the continuation of their failed philosophy. They're trying to overcome pilots' skill with sheer weight of machinery. A Zero will fly circles around it. And look, the math seemed to support him completely. The Zero's wing loading was 22 pounds per square foot. This gave it a turning radius of just 612 feet. Incredibly tight. The Hellcat's wing loading was 36.5 pounds per square foot. Its turning radius would be over 900 feet. In a turning fight, which was the basis of all Japanese fighter tactics, the Hellcat would be absolutely helpless. It couldn't outturn the Zero. Not even close. On paper, the Hellcat looked like exactly what the Japanese said it was. A heavy, clumsy attempt to compensate for inferior pilot training with brute force engineering. But here's the thing about paper. It doesn't bleed. It doesn't fight. And it definitely doesn't tell the whole story. First Blood. September 30th, 1943. Marcus Island in the Pacific. A Japanese pilot named Yoshio Fukui was flying escort for a reconnaissance mission. Standard patrol. Nothing unusual. Then he spotted 6 dark shapes climbing from the southeast. His first thought? B-25 bombers on a weird heading. Made sense. The shapes were big and bulky. Then they turned. And Fukui saw the silhouette. Single engine. Massive fusillade. Wings that seemed too short for the body. Hellcats. His after-action report describes what happened next. And it's fascinating because this is the moment where Japanese tactical doctrine met reality. And reality won. Fukui did exactly what he'd been trained to do. He rolled into a diving turn. Standard Zero tactics. Use your superior turn rate to get on the enemy's tail. The heavy American fighter would continue straight, and Fukui would curve right onto its 6 o'clock position. Except the Hellcat didn't run. It didn't try to turn with him. It went vertical. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine, producing 2,000 horsepower, that's 700 more than the Zero's engine, drove that Hellcat straight up at 3,500 feet per minute. Fukui tried to follow. And that's when he learned the first brutal lesson about the Hellcat. His Zero, so light and nimble in horizontal flight, struggled against gravity. His airspeed bled off rapidly. The aircraft started to shudder. At 15,000 feet, the Hellcat did something that absolutely should not have been possible for an aircraft that heavy. It performed a hammerhead turn, pivoted right on its tail, and dropped directly onto Fukui's 6. The American pilot opened fire at 400 meters. Fukui reported that 6 machine guns, not the 4 they expected, unleashed a volume of fire that was absolutely unprecedented. His Zero took 17 hits in 3 seconds. 17 hits. 3 seconds. Fukui survived by dropping into a spin. His aircraft riddled with holes. Barely made it back to Marcus Island. His wingman wasn't so lucky. Neither was the reconnaissance plane they were supposed to be protecting. First blood to the Hellcat. And this was just the beginning. The weight paradox. October 5th, 1943. Wake Island. A Japanese lieutenant named Yoshio Shiga led 12 Zeros to intercept what looked like another hit-and-run raid. American carriers had been launching these nuisance attacks for months. Usually, they'd flee before Japanese fighters could fully engage. Shiga figured this time would be different. His squadron climbed to 20,000 feet. Below them, 12 F6F Hellcats in 3 tight divisions. Everything favored the Japanese. They had altitude. They had position. They had surprise. They had the superior turning fighter. Victory seemed absolutely certain. What happened next shattered everything the Japanese thought they knew about air combat. The Nakajima Sakai engine that powered the Zero required hand-fitting of components. No two engines were exactly alike. Each engine was essentially custom-built. This wasn't just about one airplane being better than another. This was about one civilization's manufacturing capability completely surpassing another's. The engineering post-mortem. Professor Jiro Horikoshi was the designer of the Zero. After the war, he studied captured Hellcats extensively. His conclusion was devastating in its honesty. "We designed an aircraft for 1941," he wrote. "They designed an aircraft system for 1945. While we were perfecting the sword, they were building the industrial age." The Hellcat represented American industrial might in its purest form. Grumman's factory in Bethpage, New York, operated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. At peak production, a new Hellcat rolled off the assembly line every 60 minutes. Every single hour. The company produced 12,275 Hellcats in 30 months. Japan couldn't comprehend this level of production. In 1944, Japan produced 5,100 fighters of all types. All types combined. America produced 35,000 fighters that same year. The production system itself was revolutionary. Workers used color-coded instructions to assemble complex components. Shifts operated around the clock. Quality remained consistent despite the incredible speed. Japan was fighting World War II with artisan methods. America had industrialized warfare. The strategic revolution. The Hellcat didn't just win battles. It fundamentally revolutionized naval warfare. Before the war, military doctrine assumed that aircraft carriers were vulnerable platforms. They needed to strike first to survive. Find the enemy carriers. Launch first. Win. The Hellcat inverted this assumption completely. With sufficient Hellcat coverage, carriers became fortresses. They could absorb and repel any air attack. They could park off enemy coastlines for weeks. Their Hellcat umbrella made them essentially invulnerable. Admiral Mark Mitcher, commander of Task Force 58, understood this transformation perfectly. "With the Hellcat," he said, "we don't need to find them first. Let them come. The F6F will destroy them at our convenience." This confidence allowed unprecedented offensive operations. American carriers conducted sustained operations off the Japanese home islands. They didn't need to hit and run anymore. They could stay. Fight. Dominate. The strategic initiative had shifted completely and permanently. The cultural collision. Beyond all the technology and tactics, the Hellcat represented a fundamental cultural philosophy that invalidated Japanese military doctrine. The samurai tradition emphasized individual excellence, spiritual strength, acceptance of death, honor above survival. The Hellcat embodied systematic efficiency, material superiority, preservation of life, victory through industrial power. This philosophical gulf meant Japanese pilots couldn't adapt even when they understood what was happening. The concept of refusing combat when disadvantaged, which was fundamental to Hellcat doctrine, was literally unthinkable to Japanese pilots trained in Bushido. Running from a fight? Disengaging to survive? This was cowardice. Dishonor. But it was also tactically brilliant. American pilots would break off attacks if they didn't have advantage. They'd reset. Come back with better position. Fight on their terms. Japanese pilots would fight until they won or died. Usually died. One approach celebrated warrior spirit. The other approach won the war. The judgment of history. In 1962, the United States Navy held a symposium on Pacific War aviation. American and Japanese veterans gathered to discuss the conflict with the perspective of time. Captain David McCampbell, the Navy's ace of aces with 34 victories, stated it simply. "The Hellcat won the Pacific Air War. Period. It destroyed Japanese aviation and made our victory inevitable." Commander Saburo Sakai responded with equal honesty. "The Zero was a superior fighter. The Hellcat was a superior weapon system. We never understood the difference until it was too late. We brought swords to a gunfight and wondered why we lost." That statement captures everything. The Zero was a beautiful, elegant weapon. A masterpiece of aeronautical engineering focused on individual performance. The Hellcat was a system. Part of a larger industrial and tactical framework that included radar, radio, carrier operations,